So good evening. We're going to start our program now. It's, well, first of all, I'm Randy Gerber with Gerber, and thank you for joining us. I'm super excited about our panel tonight and the second part of our series around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's a topic that continues to get more important, and I know personally I continue to learn more and have more conversations that are meaningful and important. And I'm certainly appreciative of my own personal enlightenment on this topic, and particularly for Kimberly Lee Miner, who I'm going to introduce here in a second, who's taking a leadership role in the community and also with her business. And so last time I did this, I stumbled through reading her bio and probably wasn't as eloquent as I'd like it to be. So I'm going to shorten it up a little bit. And her professional experience started with building brands for large companies such as L Brands, et cetera. And today, she has a boutique consulting firm called Undershoot that focuses on helping business leaders strategically think about diversity, equity, and inclusion strategically in their business and how to implement ideas and execute ideas and lead conversations and make it a safe environment. And so, more importantly, she's a very purpose-centric business leader when it's all said and done, and the world's a better place because of her. So once again, she's going to moderate our conversation, and we're going to kick it off to Kimberly.
Well, thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here for this conversation. As you know, as Randy mentioned, this is our second conversation, and hopefully not the last. But this subject is extremely important, and not just the idea of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, but understanding the value of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And I can't, stress the importance of all four of those elements. And actually, as we think about what's going on in the world, every day it just seems like there's more and more need for this understanding, the value of each other and the value of our diversity. It's those differences that make society valuable. And for some reason, there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of misunderstanding of each other. And so with fear and with misunderstanding, there's no empathy. And that is the glue that enables us to work together and to be a real community and real society. And so, you asked your question. I ask questions all the time, but, I get asked, well, why is inclusivity so important? And why is equality not the same as equity? And so, you go through those conversations to explain the difference and to really share the idea of we're all valuable, whether we agree with you or look like you. And so that's what the heart of this conversation is going to be about. So as last month, we talked to industry leaders and thought leaders, and today we're going to talk to thought leaders and smaller and medium-sized business owners who are really in the thick of it, like you. Right? Most of you have businesses that are this size. And I think last month, a lot of the questions were like, well, we don't own a $1 billion business. We're not the CEO of a $1 billion business. Where do we get the resources to make the changes to transform our culture? And so I'm really honored by today's panel, the panelists, and we're going to just do a quick introduction. I'm going to ask them to actually introduce themselves, and then we're going to jump into the conversation. So I'm going to start with Gail Saunders of Saunders PR.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Kimberly, and thank you, Gerber, for taking the opportunity to have these conversations. So very important. Gail Saunders, I am the CEO and founder of the Saunders PR Group, and we are a culturally conscious, full-service PR firm located right here in Columbus, and we focus on PR firms, branding, reputation management, media relations, social media, the full gamut, communication strategy. But we really do pride ourselves on being very thoughtful about communications and using that communications and being focused on that communications from a culturally sensitive way. And so we're unique in that space. And so very proud to be part of this conversation today.
Thank you, thank you. Next, Anne.
Hi, thank you so much for having us. I think this is so incredible that you have invited small businesses. I think that's a voice that often is overlooked. So I really appreciate the opportunity to share our experience. I'm Anne Bonansigna. I'm owner of The Kitchen in German Village. We are an event venue that focuses on bringing people together to create community through food. I'm also a community member that is involved in diversity and women's issues, proudly serving on several boards in town, and I consider that kind of my other job.
Absolutely. And Alan.
Yeah, thanks again for having us. Awesome conversation, really excited to be a part of it. I'm Alan Cudisi, and I am the co-founder and CEO of Agility Partners. And we are an a tech-centric IT recruiting and consulting firm here in Columbus. We work with companies to do a number of things, but on the consulting side of the house, really look for ways to automate processes and drive business efficiency. So again, really excited to be here and take part in this conversation.
Thank you, thank you. So let's just jump in. The first thing I do want to do a little housekeeping. In several of my conversations, people get confused by the meanings of diversity, inclusion, and what those words really mean. So I just want to take a moment, PSA, just to put it out there. Diversity is a fact, right? We are very diverse right here. So when you bring different groups together, different people together, different things together, that's diversity. Okay, so that's a fact. You don't have to create diversity, it is a fact. Inclusion is the act that is important to diversity. You have to be intentional, and it has to be an act to include someone. Equity is providing the tools, right, that each person needs so that they have equal access to opportunities. So equity and equal are not the same thing. And I think that is extremely important to understand. So I'm gonna give you a little example just to make it clear. I hope it makes it clear. Let's say you're working late, you're a small business, you work late, we all work late, and you have 15 people who have worked late with you, and you think, I'm going to provide pizza for everyone. And I'm gonna make sure that everyone gets 2 slices of pizza. So I'm gonna get enough cheese and enough pepperoni to make sure that everyone has 2 slices of pizza. But guess what? Gail is vegan, and Alan is allergic to dairy, but you've only provided equal amounts of the same pizza for everyone. So that is equal, but not equitable, because now Gail and Alan are still hungry. So I hope that helps you picture what the differences mean. So now you'll know what we're talking about when we start this conversation, okay? So I'm gonna start with Gail, okay? And Gail, my first question is, it's a 2-parter.
Okay.
Jump right in. So, we've seen momentous progress with regard to women in the boardroom, in C-suite, but the progress has not been universal for all women. So what do you see as the barrier for them?
Well, Kimberly, as you were talking earlier, it made me think about fear and misunderstanding. And I think when you look at the barriers through that lens, that really does lead to implicit bias and the isms that we face in that space. So I think barriers that are part of this issue are really focused on the fear and misunderstanding of other people, of women. And so when you think about the fact that we look at Black women CEOs in corporate America, I mean, you can count on one hand, well, and not even all your fingers, right? So that just right. It just happened in 2021. And so women are as smart, as talented, and if you look at some of the leadership of women in government, it seems as though women are knocking it out of the ballpark is when they are the leaders. So I think it really does go back to that fear and misunderstanding because people are so accustomed to the status quo. And when you begin to shake up the status quo, it makes people nervous. And so I think what we are seeing in 2020 and 2021 and the explosion of social justice, I think has really helped to drive, to break down some of those barriers that we've been seeing, particularly as it relates to women.
So then the what is it? You have to see it to be it, right? So if you think about that, and especially, I know you've done an incredible job of making sure that your team is diverse,
Yes,
right, and inclusive.
yes.
What have been your hiring strategies? You know, aside from the fact that, to me, it's obvious you're in this role that allows you to be that leader who reaches in and brings someone with you. But on a bigger scale, because now your business is larger.
Yes.
What's your strategy that has enabled you to continue to do that?
Well, I'm very proud to say that most of my team are Black females. So first of all, I look for the best and most qualified candidate. That's what I do. And so the second thing I do is whenever I have a slate, when I was in corporate America, the HR, they knew, do not bring me a slate of individuals if it's not diverse. And you have to demand that. And so I take that with me. I need a diverse slate of individuals. So where do you find them? You have to seek them out. And so I go to those organizations where I know in my business, the public relations, Black public relations professionals, I know they have a slate of individuals, marketing, MBAs, whatever it is, the position I'm looking to fill, I go to those organizations that I know have a deep, rich slate of diverse candidates. And then if I need to go a little further, I look at my peers. I look at my peers to see who they've hired and who they've been talking to and anything that they have left on the table from a diverse perspective. But I also know that HBCUs have strong, strong candidates across the board. So I'm very intentional about looking for diverse candidates. And so that's how I go about hiring diverse candidates. And I do it in my business today, but I think most importantly, I did it when I was in corporate America, where you had to push the envelope to make people give you a diverse slate. And if they don't accept it.
I think that's a really important point, and I just want anyone who's watching to write that down. You have to be intentional. And I've had clients who come to me and said, hey, I have these open positions, but I can't fill them. Well, where did you post? Oh, well, I posted on LinkedIn. Okay. Well, no, you can't because you're not intentional about it.
That's exactly
right. So I think that's a really important point because that doesn't cost you any extra.
It doesn't cost you any extra, and there's no excuses. You find highly qualified candidates across the board in every demographic. So let's not use that as an excuse.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you.
Mhm.
Alan, you're next. So my question for you is, what are the challenges that you've had to overcome on your journey to business ownership?
Yeah, so, like many minority-owned businesses, I think the first things that come to mind for me are primarily tied back to funding. So, whether that be working with local venture capitalist firms or, some of the local financial institutions, or even on a larger scale. Although when you're a small business owner, you go to the local financial institutions, if you know. But we were pretty much turned away from by just about everyone. And so we did find a small crowdsourcing platform called Kiva. And Kiva allowed us to leverage our family and friends and those close to us to raise some capital. But we primarily started by bootstrapping and working out of a spare bedroom. So those challenges we remember to this day, even though we're nearly 5 years into it. And, but prior to that, with my last company, I had what I would call, but what many would call a pretty successful tenure. And, I was promoted 3 times in 5 years, and had an opportunity to report directly to the president of the organization. And I was ecstatic. I had tons of ideas about how we could leverage technology to innovate in our space and really become, an industry leader. And I can remember to this day, I was in New York on Park Avenue, 99 Park Ave, and went up to my boss's office and gave him this entire presentation about all the different ways we could leverage technology to innovate. And it was met, with, quite frankly, just disdain. There's really no other way to put it. And it was, long story short, focus on your job. You don't need to worry about this. And so here I was, this young 28-year-old, really excited about my time to make an impact. And in hindsight, man, I'm so happy that we had that conversation, because I think it was one of the biggest drivers to get me to go out on my own and start, Agility Partners. But as I think about ways that we can, prevent those things, it's creating a safe space for, everyone in my organization, no matter your race, religion, your sexual orientation, to be able to come with new, fresh ideas and innovative ways to approach problems that we see every day.
I think the story you just told is really important for people to understand, that it's because you had that experience. And oftentimes people who are in these leadership roles have never had any adversity or any, they've gotten in these positions because they've networked or had a network, and you didn't have that. And so now you can see in a broader way why it's so important to be inclusive. So I think that's great. So you haven't had anyone come to you recently with a great idea and you told them to stay in their lane?
If I hope not. If I did, they should call me out on it. And the thing for us again is this creating that safe space and allowing conversations that happen naturally. And like I said, regardless of any sort of orientation or religion or race or anything.
Are there any specific policies that you put in place to ensure that not just you, but your other leaders in your business are following that path?
Absolutely. We have an open door policy. So we have a hierarchy, right? There are reporting managers, but my door is always open, as is, my co-founder, Rob Moyer, his door is always open. And we really try to take the time every quarter to meet with, a number of folks within the organization, varying levels, to hear them out, hear what things we can do. We have a bi-weekly all staff meeting where employees can actually add a topic to our list of topics, and they can discuss different things that we can do to impact and to change the organization. So just giving them the platform to have those conversations is really important.
So Ann, so often, when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're not really talking about everything that is diverse, right? We break it down too many times. It's just black or white. And so, or gender, right? But what about intersectionality, right? Like, this is something that I know is near and dear to your heart. So can you explain how intersectionality, how important it is in understanding it, and then how it has affected you and your team, and even you as a businesswoman?
Yeah. Thank you. I think intersectionality is probably a fairly new word to most people. So I want to just take a quick moment to explain what it is. Intersectionality, my core likes to think of it as the way that you show up when you are showing up as your truest, most authentic self. You're willing to come forward and say, I am these things. And, I think it's defined in the dictionary as social markers that create the opportunity for you to be discriminated against, which I thought was interesting. I've seen it described that way, and I thought, wow. When I think about intersectionality, I think about it as I am showing up here today as a woman. That is one of my things. I'm showing up here also as a mother. That is another one of my things. I am an entrepreneur. I come from from young parents. I had me when I was young. These are also, they're the things that make up who you are, but that also give you the unique perspective on life and the workplace and anywhere else you show up that is solely yours. And I think that it's so important because we tend to look at people as only one of their things. People would say, oh, well, she's a woman. And then I think you're absolutely right, Kimberly. We often stop at the biggest categories, which tend to be in our culture, gender and then race. And then we don't get down into the, wow, maybe she has that perspective because she comes from teen parents and didn't have, this is not my particular situation, just in case my mother happens to be out there listening, the supported family. Maybe she didn't have the same opportunities for education. I think those are all things that it's important for us to stop. I think we've talked a little bit about implicit bias today too, is, you know, we look at somebody and we just make a quick judgment. We just, like, our minds just work like that, and it requires training to get past that. One thing that I think has been really interesting in our business recently as we've grown, maybe not this last year, but as we have grown and we have, our name has become more common, we have gotten a much more diverse group of people reaching out to us, which is obviously super exciting for me, super exciting for my team, but I think there were some things that we didn't quite expect. We've had a lot of requests from Muslim events and not understanding the culture enough to be able to effectively get them what they needed for the types of events that they host. It is not a straight up when somebody who is from the Muslim faith calls us and says, we want to have a bridal shower, it's not what we in the dominant culture consider a bridal shower. And we would bring them in and then we'd be frustrated because it wasn't what we thought it was supposed to be. And so that's us sort of not bothering to dig deeper and not just say, oh, this is a woman calling about a bridal shower. The intersectionality comes in as a woman of a different faith and there are cultural differences, and that it is our job, if we want to be intentional about the way that we provide services, to do the work, to dig in, to see what that means, and to see how we can better serve them. I mean, it just makes us better business people in the end.
Absolutely.
But it's a hard lesson. I can't say that I think that we've always done it perfectly well. I think we have learned a lot. And I think we've got a lot more to learn. But I think that first step of understanding, wow, we probably didn't get that right the first time or the second time, maybe even, has been really beneficial to all of us at the kitchen.
I think it's really important because what you just shared showed the value of diversity, right? And the ROI of putting the work in to find out. Because when we just look at the surface, right, as a business owner, you would never think to look, oh, culturally, let's go a little deeper, right? And understanding now they've told someone who's told someone, and you could be the vendor, right, for Muslim, you know, bridal showers, but it's taking the effort, making the effort, right, and taking the chance to make that.
Yeah,
And getting past the fear. I think Gail, you talked about fear, and that is, it's 100% that. It's partly a fear of the unknown, and it's also a fear of not knowing how to ask the question safely. And I think, Ellen, you mentioned that you know, if we could all create a safer space for each other, I think, wow, leaps and bounds, things would change so much in business. It would change so much outside of business. That it's hard to do. I just want to kind of recognize that we're not here to talk about things that are simple and easy. This is not a checklist. It's work.
Right. Well, we don't want a checklist because when you check the boxes, there's no sustainability there.
Right.
And that's when you create tokenism and a whole bunch of other isms. I'm going off script for just a second because you made me think of something. Yesterday, I was meeting with someone and they said, you know, I really want to ask you some questions, but I don't know what words to say. I don't know. I'm afraid to say the wrong words. And I said, you know, the fact that you are taking the effort to want to have the conversation, I don't really care what words you use, just, you know, certain things you can't say. But if you are just having a conversation with me because you want to know more, please just use the words you have.
Yeah.
And we can go from there. And I think that it goes back to the fear, right? But if we create safe spaces, that's the only way we move forward, right? And unfortunately, in a lot of times, the people who have to create the safe space are the people who are the underrepresented.
Right.
It's it's the fact. Okay, Randy. So this is your second session. So has the information that you learned affected the way you are building your team or run your business? Because last time you said you had quite a few aha moments. How have they manifested themselves?
So it's been life-changing and probably I'm glad you just spoke because you made it easy for me to use the right words, but the safety piece and we're small and being a small business owner is hard, period, no matter what business you're in. It's just hard. And ours is compounded a little bit by working with first generation entrepreneurs who move fast and demanding, and they're unique, and our employees have to serve them. And they're oftentimes not an entrepreneur, so like that connection is hard, And so the first thing that hit me in our last conversation was I want my people showing up their best every day. And so we have to, and so 2 years ago, well, we've always had more women than men. As far as I can remember, that's going back 30 years. And today we have a gay person, and in addition to that, person of color. That didn't exist 2 years ago. And it wasn't like, to be candid with it, and it didn't go out, we hired the best people, And I thought, oh my gosh, are we doing anything even unintentionally that's not making them be their best? I think we hired the greatest person. I want them to be at their best all the time. So having the safe environment to ask and talk, like, are we doing anything unintentionally even that makes you not? And thankfully we're not. And so I think that is, particularly as a white man, I think that's something that a lot of entrepreneurs are literally afraid of, and probably don't understand. And so the other thing, which I still think is really hard, and I'm glad to hear, Gail, you have cracked the code on it, but in the last session when Lisa Ingram was talking about, they will wait for the pool to get big enough.
Yes.
I'm like, I don't know how long I can wait for that pool to get, and particularly, the other thing, related topic, but different catalyst is COVID, right? That people had their own experience with COVID, and that really opened my eyes that people need to feel safe, and we had to be inclusive of their opinion, whether I agreed with it or not, right? And so, but as we all know, the labor market was a huge change last year for many people, and we're trying to figure out how to get, we're not hiring at this very moment, but like, okay, do we really need to get that far ahead of it to get our pool big enough? Like, should we thinking right now about a person we're going to need a year from today to get our pool? And that thinking never would have happened before. So I just want to have the best people on my team, right? And so so it's changed a lot, and I do think this conversation is hard, necessary but hard. But where my head is spending a lot of time right now is, how do you do it? Like, it's great to have the conversation and share our feelings, but then how do you actually put it in place, for a small company that you don't have, a chief people officer, which would be great, but that's a lot of money to a bottom line for small businesses. And I'm also trying to figure out how we help our clients understand the value of this and from a return on investment perspective, because it's tough. Let me put it this way. My perception is right now it's hard. Maybe it's not, and maybe there's a way to do it, but we haven't figured it out yet.
Well, it is not easy because it's the opposite of what's been happening for so long.
Right.
Right. And so you have to overcome so much, right? Not just in the actual doing and the process, but in the mindset. And I think the mindset is the biggest issue, right? Because I've spoken to people potential clients who've said, well, Kimberly, I want you to help me with this recruiting, but I want to make sure, should I hire the diverse candidate or should I hire the best candidate? And my answer is, well, yes. It's not either or.
Right.
It could be either or if you only have one person to
Right.
choose from.
Right.
And so that's something that, not to put a plug out there, but that's something that I work
Sure.
a lot on, making sure that people have the pipeline. And so, yeah, you might be a year out from hiring and you're not promising anyone anything, but you should be meeting people
Yeah.
all of the time, because it could be great. You might not have something, but you have a network
Right.
that you can introduce them in
That's
your
right.
network.
Right.
Or, that's where this really starts to get easier.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
never going to be easy,
Right.
but there are things that you can do to get easier.
Yeah.
And then also, if you're a small company, there are companies that are out there that can come in for hire where you don't have to invest in this chief person,
Yeah.
but you have somebody who has that level of experience. There's several companies out there.
Yeah, and one of the things, I don't remember when you said it, because we've talked enough that I can't recall, but, what else changed here was this my mentality, and because it has to start from the top.
Mhm.
And so call it ignorance, because that's all can be, is I just was ignorant to it, and now I'm not. And so can't apologize for where I was. I can only change where I'm going. And so it's actually exciting, frankly. And I think we'll do a better job. We work really hard we serve our clients in a whole variety of ways, and we work hard to do it, and it's tough. But I think, always getting that best person, and no matter what background, we'll do a better job for clients.
It's important. And you're in a tough industry that's
Yeah.
really been
We have
great.
clients like Alan who are just ridiculously demanding, unfair.
Yeah.
Well, if I may just say
Please
something
do.
that really resonated with me, what you said, and, I can't apologize for where I've been, but I can think about where I'm going. And so you are being intentional about where you're going. And that's how we begin to break down these systems. And so kudos to you, and you can influence other people who are in your network. And I think that's how we begin to break the barriers and break down systems, because there are systems intentionally that really do help to drive some of the barriers that we're facing.
Well, Gail, but you should say that again for the people in the back who couldn't hear you. There are systems in place intentionally, right? Because that's the issue, really. That's the barrier to inclusion. So if the barriers are intentionally placed, then anything that you have to do to turn them around would have to be intentional, right? So it's a two-way street, and understanding and accepting that. And I think that's also it, like the mindset. You have to get someone to understand that they're there and they were placed intentionally. And so you have, because a lot of people still are not, they're still not buying it, but that's a whole other conversation.
So it's maybe a question for the moderator.
Yeah.
It seems to me that there's been a lot of change in a relatively short period. We have no change forever. I understand that. But it seems to me the last, I don't know what it is, 12 months, 13 months, 10 months, the needle's moved a lot, and there's momentum that there wasn't before. Do you feel that way, or is it really this more the same?
Well, I can tell you factually that it has moved. There has been progress for certain people. And I'll give you a few examples. So when you look at women, and you just look, if you can go further back, so let's just go back 5 years, nice round number. Women in C-suite positions and on boards in general has gone from 22% to 46%. Amazing, doubled. Now, if we pull back the top on that and we look at
Intersectionality is real thin.
correct, intersectionality, Black women are still at 3%,
Got it.
right? If you put all the minorities together, Black, Asian, every ethnic minority together. They have gone from, I think, like 2.6 to 4, right?
Yeah.
Like in the same time. So when we talk about the progress, we have to be intentional
Yeah.
in what we're talking about.
Right.
Gail said earlier that there were 2 African-American women who were CEOs, right? That's Walgreens and TIAA. And that just happened in the last 30 days.
Yes.
Right. The first time was last year where Bed Bath and Beyond, not Bath and Body Works, because people get those confused, but Bed Bath and Beyond put a woman in the CEO role. She was a CFO, and they put her in the CEO role as an interim, and they couldn't wait to get her out of that role. She was in the role for like 4 months. So when you think about it in that way, progress for some, not for everyone. So I just think we have to keep our foot on the pedal and understand intersectionality and make sure when these things are happening, that it's for everyone. Even boards. I mean, Harvard Business Review just did a study, and they spoke to 19 board members. They purposely over indexed with women. So they did 15 women, 4 men. And they talked about their experience, and the thing that just stood out to me is that those 19 people they held 47 seats. 19,
Wow, yeah.
47 seats.
Wow.
And so that goes back to, oh, okay, we have to put a woman. We have a list now,
Got it.
and we're just gonna put those
Yeah,
women
right.
in these
Got it,
seats.
got it.
So it's still not where, it's not close to where it needs to be.
Yeah.
We have to stick with it. It's not a trend. It's something that
And
needs
it's not true representation then either.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah. So
Got it.
there's work to be done. Yeah. Okay, Gail, what type of investment have you had to make clients comfortable with you, right? Let's flip this. So as a woman, Black woman business owner, what has that looked like?
Well, I'll start with the tangible investments, then I'll go with the
Okay.
intangible.
Thank you.
And so equipment, I have to make sure that I have the data analysis equipment. I have to make sure that I have media relations equipment in terms of the process and the apps that really help me identify media, track media, all of those things, so that I can compete with my counterparts. And I have to let people know that I have that, because otherwise small business, Black business, don't have the same level of quality, so.
But you're competing at a higher level, right? It's not like this. In
Oh,
order
I
to
am
have all of
competing at
this,
a
you
higher
have-
level,
right.
yes, yes, indeed, so that I can compete with those firms who are larger than me financially and otherwise. And then I also have to really invest in training and making sure that my team is staying up with the latest trends. Because in our world, social media changes every moment, as you know, Mr. IT. And so all of those technologies change daily. And so you have to stay on top of those trends. But also from a crisis communications perspective, really making sure that you're staying abreast of those things that are in the moment now and how you address them. So training, I have to make sure that I'm investing in that. There are tools that we use to make sure that, our writing, since I was a little girl, my parents taught me English. You have to speak the King's English. And so it's really interesting, the microaggressions you get when you might have a typo and it's about your grammar. And so that's a microaggression when it comes to people of color. And so we have to make sure that we're on point with those things. And so those are investments. But the intangibles, I have to help my team and myself understand that when you're assertive in our space, it can be perceived as being aggressive. So you have to speak your voice, but you have to be very thoughtful about how you speak your voice. because you have to make sure that the client is comfortable and doesn't take that in a way that can be negative for our business. The other thing is we have to show up. I mean, we can't on Zoom, we have to make sure that we're showing up properly on Zoom, even though our client might be dressed a little more casual. We can't do that. So I've had to really have those conversations with our team and remind myself of that. The other thing is we really have to really think about how we address those microaggressions. And so when you talk about the things that we have to invest in coaching to help us make sure that we're showing up well. So those are some of the things that I've had to do for myself, but also for my team.
You just reminded me of something. Not too long ago, I had a call with a potential client. And, and to your point, like, gotta get, her hair was wet. And she could just and she was in her bedroom, right? This is the CMO of a company and her hair was wet. And I had to say, excuse me, and turn the camera off for a minute and get myself together. Because I was like, wait a minute. I got up, took a shower, put my, your hair is wet. So yeah.
But you couldn't show up with your hair wet.
Oh my goodness, no, not at all. So yeah, I thought that, yeah. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
So Alan, what we have discovered, and we talked about this many times, that small businesses are really either afraid that the investment in DEI is just too big for them to handle, or making the process changes, policy changes are just going to mess up their business in some way. So what do you say to that?
Well, I mean, I don't think there's any secret. We're, as small business owners, I mean, we are hyper focused on every dollar that we deploy, into our business. There is, a return on that investment. And, unfortunately, investing in DEI doesn't necessarily translate like that and when you need it to as a small business owner. However, we talked about being intentional a lot so far. And I think part of it is also educating yourself intentionally. There is a tremendous amount of research out there that will tell you that the investment you do make in DEI will pay off. I mean, McKinsey, one of the most, well-respected consulting firms, in the world, came out and said that if ethnically diverse teams outperform those that are not by 35%. Wow. They said teams with equal men and women generate 40% more revenue. So the evidence is there. I mean, the top companies in the entire world bring McKinsey and they don't bring Agility Partners in. So if they're giving us that data, not yet, not yet. But if they're giving us that data, then there's validity to it. And I think the most important one to me that I think is also overlooked is it's not enough just to bring in diverse talent, but also to look for opportunities to promote diverse talent, because teams with diverse management structures in place outperform those without by 20% and generate 20% more revenue. So, you want to talk about a competitive advantage. You understand that the power behind, putting these teams together, it's not only the right thing to do, but there's a business case behind it. So, it's no brainer.
Yeah. So Randy, what do you tell your clients now, right? Your different mindset, how do you help them get there?
Yeah, I'm frankly trying to figure it out. To be candid with you, it's a complicated topic, and I'm a cup half full person all the time. So hearing that there were no female Black CEOs, now there's 2 this year. Okay, that's momentum. I mean, I know it doesn't feel it, but that's where my head is. Okay, it's momentum. So for me, I think that I've always tried to lead by example. I mean, we made a really deliberate decision to be as innovative as we can as a company back in around 2000. When I made the decision in 2003, I had the guts to do it in 2004, and put the pedal to the metal in 2007. And I'm really dating myself. But anyways, I've always believed in innovation, and we've always embraced it. And to me, this is an opportunity to be innovative. And maybe that's a horrible way to articulate it, because it's, but that's right? We can do this and we can show our clients, by leading by example, why it's a really great thing to do. And not just business wise, but just human being. And so, so I don't have an answer to your question as much as I'd like to.
We'll come back.
Yeah. But I think what Alan just said, it is, I mean, I've noticed our own culture here, this, in having these two new folks that I love, they're phenomenal, that it just feels better, and everybody's happy and laughing and working and we're getting the job done, so, and I feel we're scratching the surface right now. So, there's a lot of education, there's a lot of proof points probably have to happen too. But I'm actually hopeful about this, and I think that there's a path forward that works.
I think education is really important, right, for everyone, not just people who are on the other side of it.
Yeah.
You have to constantly educate yourself.
Gail, one of the things that you said that is the training piece, and that's been a mantra of ours for a really long time. For any small business, they always underinvest in training. They just do. I don't care. It's hard, And I think, if I was advising, and Alan's heard me say this before, that you have to have an investment in training to grow your people, and with that, part of the whole DEI understanding and awareness should be part of training. That also goes to
100%.
no typos and whatever.
Absolutely.
Showing up for meetings. I was kind of laughing like, well, I don't like typos either.
We don't want to in my business. That's not everybody when it was out,
But if you do, it's not the end of the world.
That's right.
It's human
That's right.
mistakes,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
It doesn't mean that you put someone in a different category.
That's right.
because of
Exactly.
exactly.
Yeah, so, okay, yeah, but the training is, I do this all the time, and I just finished with Stanford's grad program in this space, because I'm like, I have to know, what's new. There's always something to it.
And this space is moving quickly, and it's across a whole spectrum of businesses and people and organizations. It's going to probably get more complicated before it gets less complicated.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so now what I'm going to do next, I don't normally do, but I thought that because everyone was in such different businesses, I could do this. Okay, so I'm going to ask you the same question, but I expect different answers.
Should have coordinated.
Here we
you
go.
guys.
Okay, so I'm going to start with you, Anne.
Okay.
How are you measuring success?
You mean in the DEI arena?
In your business, and as you continue to focus on DEI?
So we have a company value that is one team, one dream. And that means that we support each other inside and outside of the walls of the kitchen, regardless of what's going on. And so I think for me, living that value and watching my team live that value is a great measure of success. I think also not feeling successful is a good measure of success. I think you mentioned it before, is this isn't a checklist. This is ongoing work to be done. The world is ever changing. If we check the box, set it aside, then we're not doing the necessary work or the intentionality or paying attention to what's going on around us to keep our head in the game. So I think for me, making sure that my team is there to support each other, doesn't matter who comes through that door, and then that being an ongoing process for us, and sticking with it and not taking my eye off of it is super important to me.
Gail?
Wow. So success for us, we're all about the pipeline. And so when we have helped train, helped bring along younger people in our space so that they can become the next leaders in my industry, I think that's success for us. all the other measures, of course, but that is success. I would like to give an example, if I could.
Sure.
So at one of the large educational institutions here that were made nameless in the Big Ten, I led media relations there. When I first went there, they had interns, paid internships. There were no young people of color in the internship pool. And so that troubled me because not only I know there's great talent in communications across the board, people of color, but it also meant to me, I know that in order to get your job after you graduate, you have to have some internships under your belt. And so particularly in our field.
Yeah.
And so I didn't ask permission. Of course, I am in charge of that space, but never have they had people of color internships. So I reached out to someone in the journalism school. Can you give me a slate of diverse candidates? Wonderful talent. They made, at that time, it was $10 an hour, which is more, for students. But not only did it help them gain skills for their resume, for their future careers, but it also gave them a little income as they were working in trying to pursue their education. So I say that to say, building the pipeline and really being intentional about it, it really matters. And so that's what I see success, leaving a legacy so somebody behind you can continue the work.
Outstanding. Ellen,
Yeah, for us, it's the proof is in the pudding. So, look at the data, right? If you're really about it and it's really important to you, you should be able to see on paper, with the diversity of your own team, how much of a priority it really is. And so, for us, I'm really excited that, of the folks in management within my team, 50% are diverse. And yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. And, I did some numbers because I wasn't even sure, but 58% of the team in general is diverse. So we're really proud of that. 50% are women. So we've got an even split there, and we've got to continue to work towards it. There's no perfect science to it, but if you're intentional, and we've just kind of really beat that into the ground today. But I mean, if you're intentional, it's possible. It really is.
So the first question you asked was how you measure success, right? And I go back to my mom beating in my head when I was younger that go make $100,000. And I did eventually, and like, okay, this is all this feels like, and then I said, well, I want to make a different amount of money, and did that, and that was very, very unexciting and it's a letdown when you get there, right? And so part of the reason we transitioned from doing general financial planning for anybody to working exclusively with first generation entrepreneurs was the recognition that number one, I enjoyed working with entrepreneurs more as a very selfish choice I made. But if you're doing traditional financial planning, that the most important asset the entrepreneur owns is their business, probably, right? And for most businesses, the most important asset a business has are their people. And so you have to make an investment in culture in your people, and if you want to have a great business. So what a long time ago, in 2005, 6, 7, measurement success went out the door. Money, I mean, important from a practical perspective, but not remotely a turn on for me. Versus can we help our clients be better entrepreneurs, provide a better environment for their employees to live better lives? Like talk about living wages and talking about equality and equity. Now that I understand that means, and didn't, but now I do. And so, so for me, it's really still is about, can we take a client or get a new client and really help them be the best entrepreneur? And now there's a new tool in my toolbox that didn't exist before because I was ignorant. And so I think that this will help if I'm being super practical, which my wife would tell you I am too often. That you're going to get a better return on your investment in your business if you embrace DEI, right? And it's also the right thing to do. And that's one of the things that we've talked to our clients about quite a bit is you want your employees to be happy, healthy, and independent. Those are the three, happy, I want my kids to be happy, healthy, independent. And so that we can help them understand, and I think over time, with different initiatives and agendas, we've been able to do that, but this is something that's new to me. So,
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so, one of the key things that Alan said to me when we started this path, or this journey, is that he wanted anyone who attended to have tangible takeaways. And I know that each of you has supplied that, and we're going to send that out to them. But for anyone who's sitting here today and has their paper and pen and they're ready, can you give them 2 or 3 that are must-dos or must think about, or, what would you share with them that could be tangible and they could apply it tomorrow? So I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, so leverage education to drive empathy is a big one for me. So a lot of people are ignorant, and it's, they're not doing it willfully, but they just are. They're uneducated on the topic. So just leveraging education to really drive empathy, so that way people understand why, this is so important, and why as an organization we're doing what we're doing. And be intentional in that too while I'm there. But the other 2 are set goals and measure progress. Like I said, collect data, analyze it over time, provide that data to key stakeholders, compare it against other organizations, as you mentioned earlier, and really, look at it over time and see, are we progressing in the right direction with the goals that we've set? And then the third is just to, and this is probably most important to me, but eliminate bias in your talent acquisition strategy, as well as your promotional opportunities, because, especially with larger organizations, they bring in diverse talent, but diverse talent doesn't get promoted nearly enough. And so that's part of the problems within diverse talent leaves that organization. But with smaller organizations that we can, control really all aspects, we start, we can remove names from your resumes, right? So you can just remove any, sort of preconceived or implicit biases that may be there. Rewrite job descriptions to be more inclusive. Probably the most important, I think, that everyone should take note of is, this is a social media filled world now. I think we could all agree. So everyone take the opportunity to showcase the diversity you already have in-house, because I can speak for the millennials. Before I go to a restaurant, my fiance, the first thing she does is jump on Yelp to check for reviews, and then she goes on Instagram to see what the dishes are like, and then she decides whether or not we're going there. And so that happens a lot too when people apply for jobs. They'll check that Instagram page out, they'll check the Twitter, and they'll see what things that the company is really passionate about. And so if you are passionate about diversity, showcasing those things, on social media is a way to attract diverse talent. And then once you bring in diverse talent, when you really create that safe space, they're gonna then in turn, refer their friends and people that are also passionate about it. And then next thing you know, you look up and your organization is what you want it to be. And at the end of the day, for small businesses, and Randy said this, but you are your people. And so if this is important to you, that's the way you go about building it.
Thank you very much. You said something about the whole blind interview and taking it off the resume. And I studied this case study that Stanford did, and they were working with a company in Silicon Valley. So they did that very thing. They just took any identifier off except for their skill set. And they went through this whole process, and when they actually added the demographic back in, the 60% of the top candidates who were requested were underrepresented groups that would never have gotten an interview. 60%. And they took off the schools. They just put what their major was, right? And their skills. So that's a really important point. It's like the voice, right? I think that's why people love the voice. It's all about your voice.
Right.
Why wouldn't you apply that another way? So I think that's really helpful. Thank you. And
So I have one kind of like real concrete one that I feel like if you just need a resource to get you started is really helpful. Your local nonprofits have so many resources for you. Use them. That is what they are there for. And in many ways, or in many situations, it is a social enterprise for them. So you're doing double duty. You get extra credit. So the YWCA has a racial equity 101. It's $25 a person. So if you're looking for a very inexpensive way to kickstart a conversation in your organization, I think there is no better way than to tap into that. They can provide all kinds of support on that conversation too. And the Women's Fund has a gender bias program. So taking kind of two sides, the gender bias does work a lot with that intersectionality that we've talked about. So I think it's really useful when you're starting to really try to figure out, learn what that means and how it might show up in your own organization. The thing is, I would say, you know, we review our company values quarterly. And so we constantly are saying, okay, does this still represent who we are? Are we missing anything? Are we, you know, have we changed at all? I think really thinking about a value that elevates diversity and inclusion in your organization, it sets a tone from the top of the organization that says, you know, this is what our values are. And if you don't live to these values, that's just not something we do here. It allows you to guide so many other parts of your business. So I really recommend taking a look at that and just seeing if you feel like they're aligned with what your goals are around diversity and inclusion. And then the last thing I've been thinking about is just making sure that you are having the conversation about diversity and inclusion in those leadership positions. I think, you know, Alan talked about this, is that you really, it has to be intentional. We use that word a lot, and I think we can't use it enough, is that you're going to have to set out to really highlight this. It's not just gonna happen. So taking those steps to, I think that taking the names off of the resumes is a really easy first step. And then just sort of seeing what you can do, but you've got to put one foot in front of the other and just make it happen. So using an intersectional lens when you're doing hiring and promotions is really important. And so just put one foot out there and get going with it.
Don't talk about it, be about it, right?
Yeah.
Gail?
I'm going to lean in on what you stopped with, where you ended, and that is being intentional about your lens and the intersectionality. And so I would start with looking at organizations that have the skill set that you're looking for. National Black MBA, Hispanic MBA, National Engineers, those organizations that are professional organizations that have talent pools. And that so begin to develop relationships, identify your local and even national organizations where you can begin to build a diverse pool of candidates. The other thing that I would highly recommend is that we give each other grace. I mean, grace is so important as we look at our teams, but also as we look at ourselves, because we have quite a bit of learning to do in this space. And if you are really learning and sometimes ignorant to what you don't know, we all have those blinders, we all have biases. Read, get you some good books. There are so many books about this topic that can help you broaden your horizons, broaden your information around it. And so read, I will say that. And then finally, I will add, build your relationships around people who don't look like you, who don't have the same religion, same, build your base, surround yourself with people who are not like you so that you can learn directly from others. So those are my core takeaways.
Thank you. Fantastic. Okay, Randy, we're gonna leave it with you.
So I took this very literally as
That's
like
fine.
to-dos. I wish I could have repeated everything Alan said, but You know, our one to do that we took away from our last session was we have to start interviewing earlier, more often. I mean, it's actually a very actionable activity that will yield results. And the other one for me, and which I'm not afraid to share with others, is ask questions. I mean, I wish I read more than I do, and it's probably shouldn't say that publicly, but you know, when I'm reading's not my first choice because I do so much here. But for me, it's conversations and asking questions and engaging, and not be afraid to ask questions. And I think Kimberly said when we first sat down was, you can ask a question you want, you know, just do it the right way. And I believe that, right? So, and I wrote it down before you said it, but the grace piece is super, I mean, more than ever, it's remarkable, the bad behavior, particularly in the last 12 months out there with people. And you know, the world would be a better place if we all had a bit more grace and forever, not just for now. You know, I sent a note to somebody today that, you know, one thing I didn't miss about COVID was the mass shootings, you know, that like, seems like, here we go. And it just felt so awful, so awful. So we got to find, people forget it. America was built on a melting pot, right? And that was the intention. So back to ignorance, but you know, it was built that way, and that's what the intention was, right? And we need to think that way, behave that way. So.
And I would take that a little further, because when we were growing up, of course, we heard about the melting pot, and now that I'm an adult, I don't really want to be in a melting pot. I'd rather be in a stew, because
In a
I
what?
feel a stew.
Stew.
Because of the melting pot, like if you go to the melting pot, they mix everything in there and it comes out and it just looks like yellow.
Cheese.
Got it.
Right?
Yeah, stew's got a bunch of, yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
and so, but if you think about like a stew, you have all these different ingredients and it's delicious because the flavors just mix so
you're right.
great, you know, the whole spicy
And they maintain their structure.
That they
Right.
maintain their structure.
Right.
And when they're not good individually.
Right.
But when you come together, man, it's
Right.
amazing.
Learn
So
something new.
I would, so I would say that. And, you know, I'm not asking myself this question, but I would give 2 resources that I think that people should definitely have on their bookshelf. And if you don't want to read, you can watch this. But the one is a book, it's called The Sum of Us, and it's by Heather McGhee. And it is about the value of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it really illustrates how when we aren't together and we don't embrace DEI, it costs everyone. So I think that's an excellent book. And then the other, you know, if you like shorts and you like Pixar, I recommend this to everyone. It's called Pearl, P-U-R-L. And it's a short, I don't even think it's 8 minutes, but it was created by 2 women at Pixar to illustrate the toxic masculinity of Pixar. But what's important about it is that, you know, it's a cartoon, so it's easy to watch, but it's so emotional. You can apply it to any type of diversity, and the message comes through loud and clear. So Pearl, P-U-R-L, and The Sum of Us. So we're at Q&A. What do we have over there, Alan?
I
I don't have a bus.
So, oh, maybe I need this. So far, I see people commenting, but I don't know that I see any questions yet. Bear with me.
Okay.
Almost there. Oh, there's Bambi.
Oh. Wow.
I don't see any questions. There's some good comments. So if there are any questions, now's the time to send them.
Because we're like 2 minutes from our.
We're 2 minutes from our ending point.
That's right.
Mhm.
Okay, amount of
I'm
senior.
gonna guess that we're not gonna get
I
any
guess
questions.
that's good. That means we did a really good job. Guys. Let's give ourselves a hand. It's been wonderful having this conversation, and I hope we get to do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me too. So,
It's really important work, and it's dynamic. And so we need to stay with it and share as often as possible because we learn from each other.
Yeah.
So thank you for taking the time.
I
Thank
was
you for
just gonna say,
inviting
yeah.
me
Yeah,
and
yeah,
us.
yeah.
Thank
And
you.
Happy to do it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was just
Thank
gonna
you.
say too, just for anyone just listening and for Randy, we talked about safe space a lot for people to bring up, different ideas. The same safe space should apply to people who are ignorant, trying to understand
Yes.
how,
Yeah.
to
That's great.
improve and to take this seriously. So, I applaud you because, it's not
Yes.
easy and it can be really tough to, well, I mean, even when I say I'm ignorant about anything, I'm, kind of in my shell when I do this. So, and this is a very powerful topic that can be really difficult to talk about. So I think that's just important for anyone on this call and for, who's interested in taking this seriously, to just know that safe space applies both ways.
So I actually have to say I appreciate the thanks, but the truth of the matter is it really goes to Allison Forche, who was the brainchild behind this. It was not me. She's been phenomenal here. And as soon as she brought it to my attention, I'm like, ooh, okay, it's a big topic, it's really important. We're going to do it. And on the condition, we also had small businesses too. Because I'm like,
Yeah.
that's
Mhm.
I'm going to have a tough time processing, these large companies. So for me, like, this conversation particularly has been really, really enjoyed the last one. I enjoyed this one. I learned more today. And so thank you, Allison, for taking a lead on that. And thank you, everybody. And we're going to sign off now.
Okay.
So, thanks.
Thank
Good night,
you.
everyone.
Good night. Thank you.